So for this Sandbox episode, we're excited to talk to somebody who we've talked about on the show, and I'm sure if you are in the poster art world, you know this guy's name. We are talking to the prolific designer and illustrator, Mr. JC Richard. Welcome, JC, to the show.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much. Hello, everybody. How are you?
Hey, so first and foremost, before we jump into the whole conversation, I need to say Patrick's not here for this episode, and he's super sad about it because you have gotten to know Patrick. You've been able to hang out with him. We spent a couple of days together.
Fast friends is what you call that. Friends.
Fast friends. And so he's sad to not be here. But I'm glad that you were able to make it. And we had a chance to meet back at the International Festival of the Arts, and that weekend was great. You came to the meetup, and if you've listened to the show before and you were on the show a couple weeks ago, you know that JC and we have a long-standing relationship going back further than he even realized until about 45 minutes into our conversation. But JC,
that was a fun moment, wasn't it? I like that. That was fun.
It was. So tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Oh, I've been a commercial illustrator for about 15 years now. Started out as more of a CG guy working in the modeling world and the animation world. I used to work on television shows and do matte work and texture work and basically anything anybody would hire me for back then. And then I sort of transitioned into, back into the 2D world, like loving the still image, how you could capture all that stuff in an individual image, and sort of tried to strip stuff down, and screen prints were sort of the best avenue to do that. So that's when I started to get into screen prints and the screen print world and this little subculture, which we all love so much.
Yeah, so let's kind of backtrack. Let's go back to the start of your career, and then work our way back up to what maybe a lot of the people who are listening know you for, which is work with Mondo and Cyclops and various things like that. When you say that you were working with animation and CG, like what specific elements were you working with?
Do you guys remember shows like Babylon 5 and Star Trek Voyager? Sure. Things, around the turn of the millennium, sort of that stuff. Right before the big tech crash of 2000, which wiped out a lot of those companies. I used to do a lot of spaceship work. I used to do a lot of nebula work. If you ever saw Space Battle on TV, there's a good chance I made the background for that. I did the stars and the planets and the nebulas, and basically I was a glorified digital set designer.
That's awesome.
And that was a lot of fun. That was probably how I got into commercial art.
So did you know about like I don't know how to say this, like space composition as far as like nebulas and stars and
like was I into astronomy and things like that?
Did you know that stuff going into it?
I became familiar with it. Yeah. Okay. When it's funny. Nobody even talks about this show, but Babylon 5, which I think celebrated an anniversary recently, they were the first people to realize you needed something behind the spaceships to sort of highlight the action in front of it.
Sure.
And they would put these beautiful nebulas and these beautiful spacescapes behind all this action. And now it's sort of it's very standard.
Right.
But they were the first people to sort of do that. And so it was almost like creating just almost like a classical backdrop for this stuff. It wasn't supposed to be the focus of it, but it was supposed to augment the foreground action.
Yeah.
And so it was the kind of design that you sort of wanted to get out of the way, but you wanted it to be basically pretty colors, pretty pictures to look at, and just augment the scene.
Yeah.
I could totally see that. I don't know if influence is the right word, but I can totally see how you would be really good at that when I look at what your current work is, and I look at the composition that you do, and there's always a lot of attention given to the landscape and to what's surrounding your subject, and I can see how that influences that and how that would make sense. Were you did you only specifically work in space, in like the space composition stuff, or did you also do work with like Xena Warrior Princess? Like,
I would do mountain backdrops and just general matte work. What people don't realize is even a heavily CG scene, which is there's tons of computer generated effects. A lot of that stuff is done on a flat background. I mean, it's a little bit like the old style animation. I mean, you're literally doing almost cell work. The foreground action is 3D, but a lot of the background action can be 2D, especially if there's just very simple animation involved. So you can really augment a scene. You can really improve a scene by the backgrounds. I think that's sort of a lost art, actually. They sort of put in too much eye candy. They don't know how to simplify the background elements enough to let you focus on the foreground and to let your eye sort of adjust to what you should be paying attention to. If you put too much detail, it almost takes away the impact of whatever you're supposed to be looking at.
Sure.
That's an interesting concept, because I think about movies like Zootopia, right? Where you have these crazy detailed worlds that they live in, and this show, and I say that movie specifically as opposed to some other one. Another good one would be Big Hero 6. They show these
beautiful animation,
right?
Gorgeous.
Yeah. But they show so much of these worlds as a way of creating scale and as a way of creating the universe, to bring you into this universe. But to the point where you're like, every time you look at the film, every time you watch a scene, you could pause it and see something entirely new. And I don't know if that's good or if that's bad. I guess that it can go either way depending on what you're trying to do with the storytelling, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because you want to leave enough in there so it holds up multiple viewings and there's enough candy in there to enjoy a freeze frame, which is just the reality of modern filmmaking. You have to make sure that frame, if someone's going to stop it, is going to look gorgeous.
Right.
I mean, if you're spending that much money. At the same time, like we said, there's a limit to how much the human brain is going to process within a certain amount of frame time. I mean, filmmakers have known this. I mean, I think that's why the whole Hobbit experiment, do you remember that experiment from a few years ago where Peter Jackson, everybody's going to use this frame rate from now on, and everything's going to look like like a soap opera. Even using the word soap opera seems so dated now because nobody even watches soap operas anymore. Sure. But you know what I'm saying? It looks like video. It doesn't look like that 24 frames per second, that natural motion blur, that natural artifacting that you get from the film process. It's sort of related to what we're talking about. There's a clarity limit that you want to deal with. I mean, you're trying to tell a story. You're not trying to overwhelm somebody's visual sensors. You want there to be some sort of balance between what I'm getting from the story and what I'm getting from the visuals. Yeah. And when one overtakes the other, I think that's when you get these sort of, I hate to say it, that's DC's problem. That's right. You can hammer me with so many visuals. If I don't care about the visuals, it's not going to be impactful. I don't care how much quality is in there. I don't care how much time you spent on it. It's just not going to land. And I think, that's what more people have to, I think, focus on.
So I think we'll see I'm already seeing a theme kind of trend with this conversation, and it's the idea of storytelling and the. You
caught me at a very contemplative moment, so this is good. This is going to be.
That's 18 hours of no sleep and
power out in the driveway. Yeah,
that's when
snow
you
shoveling.
Catch JC at his most contemplative.
I might be a little more intense than usual, so I just have to caution everybody. I'm a pretty intense guy in general, but I've been going, so
we'll lighten it up as this goes along. We'll get to Disney. Soon enough. But in this concept of storytelling, you made this comment earlier that you started your career in the television world and creating this stuff, but then you made this realization. You had this realization. Something happened. There was this aha moment where you decided that you wanted to pursue the storytelling element from that snapshot element, from like a one image telling that same story, but through a singular image as opposed to, motion picture. Talk to us about that moment. Can you identify exactly when that happened, and what was it that made that transition for you?
No, that's an interesting question. I never really thought about it like that. Was there a nexus point? Was there a turning point that I made I think it came out of the fact that CG work is largely a thankless job. No matter how good you are at it, no matter how skilled you are, unless you're producing the actual animation, if you're one of the worker bees, there is such a monumental effort from so many people to create these movies that people, that's why they created these post-credit scenes. When you sit there and you're like, oh my God, look at how many people worked on this. They worked in Malaysia. They worked in all these countries for all these different companies to create this incredible whole. And all these individuals are largely lost in that process, as talented as they are, and they should be lauded for what they do. We see The Last Jedi, and we see, the Guardians of the Galaxy, and we see all these Marvel movies, Black Panther, which was incredible looking movie. And you will never know any of the artists that created a lot of those scenes a lot of the elements that you see, these are thankless jobs, man. You'll never hear about these guys.
Yep.
And that is largely what that industry is. And I love these guys. Like, I will always highlight them and focus people back on their efforts, because without them, we're talking about stage plays, basically. Yeah. I mean, not a lot's filmed. And I think that definitely affected my move into 2D. It was also just a matter of, like I said, stripping stuff down. I think what screen printing has taught me is that, limits are important for art. You can't, if you don't have limitations and things to press up on and things to push back on you, you're just not going to really understand what you're doing. There's a lot of people that think that more detail is going to be the way to go, and I understand that. I mean, I call it detail porn. A lot of people do. It's this fascination with, and I've been accused of it. That's the fascinating part to me. Is
your work isn't like
as much quote unquote. Yeah, as much as I think I pull elements out and I can give you the essential elements and nothing else. There's lessons that I learn. I think art is largely the art of simplification. It's largely paring it down. I think that's what people react to. I think that's why people react to screen prints so emotionally, and they sort of connect to this, is that number one, it's the hand. It's the organic element. It's the analog element to it, but it's also the stripping away of a lot of the artifice that people have become accustomed to. And I think I'm sort of over talking it, but
no,
I think a lot of people are sick of being spoon-fed things. They don't need a lot of detail especially when we're talking about properties that are from their childhood, and it hits that nostalgia button in their brain. I don't have to, I've mentioned this before as an example. If I'm drawing Superman, I don't need the S. The S is something that everybody knows, everybody will see in every comic book, but you can connect to that property and that character by using just moments throughout his history, which people haven't seen before. And it's almost like you're rescuing moments from pop culture. And that's the most fascinating part of this 2D image is to me, sort of stripping away all the shading and whatever, the 3D stuff, is that you try to get to the core of what connects people to the character. And I think that is rewarded in what we do in all the posters that we talk about, is that I think getting to the core of these characters and being simplistic with your approach, and not simplistic, I should say, stripping it down to the essential elements. That's the important part of the job. And that's the part that fascinated me and brought me back into 2D from 3D.
Sure. Well, yeah. So let's springboard that for a second, because I think that adequately, if people are sitting here and they haven't seen your work, or they haven't put your name to the work that they have seen yet, and they're not in front of a computer where they can see this yet, an adequate description of what you do is what you said. It's capturing a moment, and not just capturing a moment from the film, although you do that. It's capturing a moment of that character or the characters or whoever it is. You're presenting a scene as if it were a clip from the movie or a snapshot in time. And that's what I think sets your stuff apart from maybe, and there were, so I'm going to say a name, and I don't mean this to like in any way, shape, or form diminish the work that this other artist does, but like if you're looking at like one of the Marvel posters that like Tyler Stout does, right? It's a collage of heads and maybe a few full figures in this kind of action, or in like this stoic position, like they're standing there or whatever, but they're not depicting a scene. They're more creating. They're showing you the characterization of these characters, right? Yours is like seeing an illustrated version or a hyper real version of like a film negative, right? So you could like totally see this being a direct pull from a movie. So like if for instance the piece you did with Mondo last year for MondoCon from Monsters Inc., where they're riding the doors, right? The main focus, the characters in that are Mike and Sully, right? And you could easily have just created Mike and Sully standing there, kind of, Sully leaning on Mike's head, and just done the characters. But that's not what you did. They're actually maybe 5% of the whole picture. You've created the door factory and intricately put in all these doors, not in a way that is distracting or not in a way that is taking away from the main focus, but you have created a scene, and there's action happening, and there's emotion happening in a lot of the stuff you're doing. The Indiana Jones piece you posted.
You've hit on it. You've hit on a key thing. Like, my interest in these properties is about the character's relationship to the environments. Mm-hmm. I think that largely is what the storytelling is. And when you remove it and you just either give the character or you give the environment, you're breaking the story. Basically, I like to treat them both as integral parts. The environment is just as important as characters, and oftentimes it's not treated as such. Like I said, I was in the candy business. I was in the eye candy business for a long time, so I know how to do that. But at the same time, I know how that can get in the way of the character, and vice versa. They both have to work together, and they both have to be in balance in whatever you're presenting, in whatever imagery, whether it's moving or not. So yeah, I think you hit on it. Is you're trying to create that balance between the environment and the characters, and give them some context. You can tell a story in that image if you provide the proper context for the characters.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's a fascinating part about the whole sort of poster resurgence is people are trying to do more, I think, with these images. You're not just trying to sell them, you're trying to tell a story. And to do that with one image is kind of incredible if you can pull it off. I think that's what's rewarded. That's why people go, they see one image and it'll become just the iconic image. What happened last time? Matthew Woodson, who great up and coming artist, great guy too. And he captured a property that a lot of people had tons of nostalgia for, but he nailed that 2001, right? Mm-hmm. And he made you assess that. He made you go back to that movie and say, okay, what do I love? This is what I love about that movie. Oh, maybe I didn't see that before. It re-examines the properties that they're actually tackling, and that's incredible to do in a still image, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to shift a little bit because
I'm sorry, I'm so verbose.
No.
I'm feeling very contemplative tonight.
It's good. You talk about the relationship with the character and the environment, and I know a thing that you love, and I didn't get to experience this with you, is Disney. So Disney is super good about in their parks that marriage of the environment in their characters. So talk a little bit about how that works for you. Is that part of why you love Disney so much, or talk about your love of Disney or the parks from your perspective?
Oh man, you nailed it right there. That's exactly why I love Disney. It's constant storytelling. I mean, as Andrew can probably attest to, I never stop looking at everything in these parks. I walk through them like museums. I mean, they're literal monuments to me. I mean, if you know the Imagineers, which is a made up word, they're just engineers who built rides,
Sure.
but it's fun to call them Imagineers. It seems whimsical, which I love. But these Imagineers, they were constantly worried. I mean, I'm not so sure about modern day because there's just so many factors involved. But when you had one guy that could just greenlight something because he liked it, I mean, that was when these guys really shone. I mean, even in Walt Disney World, which a lot of people think is the lesser park, which I think everybody knows Disneyland's better. But the Magic Kingdom was built by the same people.
Yeah.
And it has its own storytelling, and it has its own, like how about the stain down the middle of Frontierland that I showed you, Andrew? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Just enlighten Luke into that.
Okay, this is not a deep dive into Disney geekdom, but there's a brown strip that goes through Liberty Square and it goes into Frontierland.
Okay.
Which is unique to the Magic Kingdom. This strip, most people just walk over it; they don't even see it. It's brown amongst the red concrete, the red slurry or whatever they put down, and you're walking through colonial America, 1776. You see the Liberty Tree, and you. I didn't show this to Andrew. That's why we have to go back to the parks together. I didn't show you the Mississippi. There's an actual little Mississippi that you cross to get into the frontier. You're going into the West.
Nice.
And you cross over this fake Mississippi, and you see this brown streak, and you're like, why is this brown streak here? It looks like a path of some. It's actually meant to evoke the fact there's sewage in the middle of the street. You're in colonial America. There's no flushing toilets. All you did, you took that pot out of the bathroom or the outhouse or whatever, and you dumped it in the road. And the road had a gully going down the center of it that would turn just this putrid brown. And they don't thankfully they don't pipe in the smell.
Yeah, right.
But
it's not
walking down that, it's called. I mean, there's been many. One of the famous Jim Korkis and Sam Genoway and all these people, they call it the architecture of reassurance. And there's these things around you that you don't even notice consciously that sort of seep into your like you don't know that's a stain. I'm sorry, that's what it is. But that sort of brings you into that world, and you. It doesn't have to be conscious. It's just something that you sort of, when somebody tells you like, oh yeah, but it just makes it that much more authentic. And that is the subtle storytelling, which draws me to these parks and keeps me going back and keeps them from being like people. I mean, a lot of people look at you as an adult and like you go to Disney. It's like Disney parks are not built for kids. That's the biggest, that's probably the biggest lie that's ever been perpetrated.
Right.
Disney parks are built for everybody. Mm-hmm. They have a level of detail where if you want to enjoy them as a child, it's there. If you want to enjoy them that's the whole point of them it's like one of those great images that we're talking about. You can see whatever you want to see. If you like the detail, there's a little that's there for you. If you like the overall feel, the ambience of or what it evokes, that's there for you too. It gets out of your way and allows you to bring something to the experience. It doesn't dictate it to you, which I think is the important part of any art. You have to make sure that you're allowing the viewer, whether you're walking through a theme park or whether you're looking at an image or whether you're watching a movie, you have to allow them to be part of the process. Yeah. And that's what makes something just mean something to people. And those are the things that are going to be nostalgic to people later on, 20, 30 years down the road. And that's what you try to keep in mind as an illustrator, that it's not about you, it's about the story. And if you serve the story, it's going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is a perfect transition into what we would say now is your current career, right? So we've talked about your love of storytelling. We've talked about your love of capturing an image in one, or capturing a story in one image. And we've talked about your love of Disney. Now you get paid to do all of those things at once, right? You get
I like it when you say it like that.
You get the unique opportunity that so many people, especially our listeners, but so many people worldwide would love to have, which is you get to work with some of these properties that you grew up with, and some of these properties that captured your imagination, whether you were a kid or a teenager or even as an adult. Things like Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, Little Mermaid. You're working with these properties. So talk to us about that transition and your relationship now with Cyclops, and what that means to you personally, being a lover of Disney and of storytelling and of art.
Oh, that's a lot to unpack there, man. That's working with Cyclops. Obviously, working with all these Disney properties is a dream come true for somebody that enjoys Disney in the parks like I do.
Yeah,
and it's an interesting question, because you want to bring your own sensibility. That's why people hire you in the commercial art world. And by saying commercial art, I just mean getting paid for what you do, and you're required to work with certain companies that are going to have their own goals, and you're serving something that's bigger than you. That's commercial art. Fine art is when you don't give a shit and you can do whatever you want. That's great too. But if you want to do commercial work, you're going to have to make some compromises. And people, it's funny. People often see Disney and the things. It's like you're going to mainstream, or you're doing corporate work. That's the challenge, man. The challenge is to bring something that how many people have tackled these things? How many people have done Cinderella? How many people have done Beauty and the Beast? These things are beloved, and rightfully so. And so many people, so much fan art, so much love for this stuff. And all you can do is bring your own experience to it. All you can do is say, this is why I love it. I have to show people why I love this property.
Yeah.
I have to show them how I view this stuff, what I see, the beauty in it that I see. And that's the trick of commercial art, is taking one of these properties that's been almost driven into the ground, and you try to make it fresh, and you try to see it like you've never seen it before. And that's the beauty of some of this Disney stuff, most of this Disney stuff. Yeah. And I say Disney stuff like it's nothing, but I'm trying to sort of not put it up on a pedestal. You can't do that as an artist. You have to say, okay, these artists did unbelievable work. I have to sort of channel the feeling and the storytelling. And as long as you stay true to what they were trying to evoke, you can't go wrong there.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it's been one of the most stressful things that I've ever had to work on, is working on Disney property, because that so many people have their own ideas of what these things should look like. They have their own idea. They've been fed the imagery for their entire lives, so it's very familiar. And to try to bring something fresh to that is a real challenge.
Yeah. So I don't know if this question it works, but how do you do that? Like, are there methods that you take? Is it like you're looking at a scene and you're going, okay, what if you look at it from this angle versus what the camera angle was, or if the
having
lighting
kids helps. Having kids helps a lot, man. Watching these things with my children and rediscovering a lot of this stuff has been a rebirth in my love for these films and the storytelling, because I never realized you don't remember that. You don't remember the time when you saw you hope you can wax philosophical about it, but you don't really remember the time you saw Peter Pan.
Right.
But I've seen my kids see Peter Pan for the first time, and I focused on how it affected them. And to see something that was made in 1953, man, I mean, before Disneyland was even a reality. I mean, they didn't even start construction until 1954. So this is something almost they can't even imagine it. It would be ancient to anybody else, but this is modern story. Like, think about something from 53. We have nothing around from 53. We don't deal with that. We don't think about that generation, that post-war generation. Most of the kids and the millennials, and I don't say that as a pejorative, that these are good kids. They just don't have any familiarity with this time.
No reference
and for them to watch something like this and to be so impacted by something that they don't even know the cultural context of what happened back then.
Yeah.
I mean, most people don't even know that, when Disneyland was built, when they called it Sleeping Beauty's Castle, that was a marketing tool, man. That was the movie wasn't going to come out for years. The movie wasn't out until, what was it, 57, or I think it was 57. So 55 to 50. I mean, that was, nowadays they'd be like, oh, you shill, you just, but we don't, these stories were so timeless that, they can just leap those generations like that. And that's amazing to see that. That's what giving me more respect for this stuff. And you, to get back to the question you asked how I deal with it, I try to just deal with it like you have to forget the history. You have to forget the burden that's on you. And you have to say, oh, these kids don't know all that baggage. They don't understand, like, all the stuff I just detailed to you. They don't see that. But as long as I give you the story of Sleeping Beauty, as long as I give you the story of Beauty and the Beast, they already did the work. I just have to get out of the way, give you what impacted me and how I interpreted that story, and that should be enough. And if it's not, then it's not. But if you try to do anything more than that with it, that's when you get into trouble. Especially with consumer products, which I want to.
Oh yeah, and that's a whole nother story, right? So I know
I'm talking blue sky here.
Yeah,
to use a Disney term, I'm talking like doing what you want, but then obviously your ideas are going to run up when you're dealing with any commercial enterprise. You're going to run up against the money men, the people that are going to tell you, no, we're not going to do this. This is not how we want to represent this property. Yeah. It's not going to work for us in a non-creative level. And that's stuff you have to deal with. But you feel fulfilled no matter what, because you respected the storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. And okay, so that's kind of, we're going to shift to final questions so that we can be aware of your time and be aware, keep this bite size for everybody. But that's kind of the direction I want to take my question for you. All right. So you've spent how many years have you been doing poster work, specifically like working with Disney properties and things like that?
I've been working with the poster stuff for like about 8 years now, since 2010, I would say.
And you've got quite a catalog. You've got quite a portfolio of films and shorts and maybe even some TV shows worked in there. What is a property, whether it's Disney or something else, but what's a property that you have yet to tell the story of that you are clamoring to work on?
Oh man, that's a great one. Oh, that's to be honest, at this point, this year especially, I've honestly tried to tell my own stories. At this point, at some point, I mean, I've worked on Star Wars, I've worked on, Indiana Jones and Disney, and what you learn is at some point, what I initially got hired for was sort of thematic nature work, which was unthemed, which was untethered to any commercial property, and I think that I sort of, it's almost like filling the well. I've been to the well these properties from my childhood and these properties from pop culture are really important to sort of fill that well, and they can take you so far. But at some point, if I want to get a Star Wars job, or I want to get an Indiana Jones job, and I want to bring something new to that, I have to spend time woodshedding for that. I have to spend time working on my own stuff, seeing what works for me, seeing what works for people that my patrons, which I respect so much. And I use that word. I don't even use the word customers. These are modern day Medicis, man. These are people that allow me to do what I do, and they buy my work and they support me so I can take these chances and maybe, do something that's a little more personal, something that the one compliment that I get that is so important when I do anything that isn't pop culture related is, what movie is this from? I love this, but what movie is this from? You wouldn't believe how many times I've heard that. And some people would think, oh, that's insulting. A lot of fine artists would say, oh, I don't have to. Yeah. It doesn't have to. Why do you need a pop? It doesn't have to be Star Wars. But I find that like, oh, you connected with the image. You're just looking for the context now. You're just asking me why you should be invested in this. And that's when I tell them the story. There's always a story behind these images. I do a series of nature prints where I just follow a couple around the world. And people ask me all the time, did you go there? I'm like, no, I didn't go there. I want to go there. I'm telling you the story of people that are allowed to go there. I would, this is all wish fulfillment for me. Whether I'm dealing with Indiana Jones or I'm dealing with just a couple I made up in my head that's going to go to the South Pacific. I mean, as long as you stay focused on this stuff and you stay focused on how it impacts people, it's always going to be a successful image. It might not be the thing that's going to flip for 100 million times what the initial price was, but at least, these are and I tell anybody that's illustrating, that's how you become known for a style. You cannot, you have to make sure that you're always filtering these stories through your own sensibility, visually and everything else. And as long as you do that, people will notice you. And people noticed me, and they will say, oh, you're bringing something different to this thing that we never saw. And all right, give this Batman a shot, even though I've never done a Batman poster, but okay, I'm going to do a Batman poster. I'm going to bring something to that, and I'm going to show you Batman like you've never seen it. That's perfect. If you're not doing that, that's what the alternative poster scene, if this is even a scene, can I even use that word? It sounds so silly, but if it exists for anything, I mean, what does it exist for? To stretch these boundaries. And the biggest crime against this stuff is to treat it like it's just any other poster, to treat it like it's just selling something. Because there's a million people working in a million ad agencies that are thinking just that way. So if you want to do that, go work for an agency. But if you want to actually give something back to these properties that have given you so much. And I really do respect the storytellers and the screenwriters and the directors that they've given me all this. They've given me this inspiration, and it's up to me to give something back to these things. Yeah. And it's not trivial. And I know commercial mainstream, some of these properties can seem so mainstream. It almost seems inconsequential, but they're not. Because they affect real people's lives. And I just think that as long as people keep stretching the boundaries and keep thinking about this the right way, that, there's no question it can keep going and keep growing. The only thing that scares me is people, like I said, fall back onto the tropes of the poster world. And, no one will give a shit if it looks like every other poster. You have to distinguish yourself. And so I don't know,
dude, that's perfect. And you're I feel like this whole conversation you've been setting up for us to ask. Yeah,
you've made it really easy,
which is really serendipitous.
I'm so sorry.
It's good, dude. It's so I'm giving my final question to Patrick. Patrick is not here. He's very sad that he's not here. But you're talking about, looking at these properties a different way and trying to tell an authentic story from your point of view. And that's not an easy thing to do, obviously. Patrick, his final question is where does that confidence as an illustrator come from? Because that's not an easy thing to do, to go, especially to a corporation like Disney, and say, hey, I get your characters, I get your IP. I'm gonna go my way with it because I feel like this is the story that I get from it. Where does that confidence come from to do that?
Oh man, that's a great question. I don't see it as confidence. I see it as almost desperation, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
I see no other choice. It's not easy to make a living drawing. You have to pump out a certain amount of work within a certain amount of period. It's tough to explain to non-artists how it feels to draw for your dinner, literally. I mean, you're drawing for your mortgage, you're drawing for all these things that people just, that's a tremendous amount of pressure if you allow yourself to think about it. That's what I mean about sort of the purity of your approach. You have to, my son, who's huge into basketball, people will understand this. You have to trust the process. You have to set up a, like we were talking about storytelling. And as long as you stay true to that storytelling, you have to trust that whatever you do within that framework, you're going to be okay. And after you do it a certain amount of times, and you get certain pushback, it's not always easy. Everybody is not always going to love. The thick skin is very important. You gotta develop that. If people tell you they don't like it, it doesn't mean it's not good. It just means they don't like it. Yeah. And that's really tough for somebody to understand. You have to look at that person's opinion as that's their opinion, man. And I appreciate it, and it's valid, but it ain't truth. And there's nothing that's not objective, man. That's subject. That's your deal. And as long as you don't let that affect your path and what you're trying to tell, the story you're trying to tell, and it moves you have to be confident it's going to move somebody else.
Yep.
And that's all you can do as an artist. You have to move yourself and then hope, I'm not that strange. I'm not that different than you. I must have something in common with that person. So you're going to like this too. That's, if I had to pare any of this down to like a base thing, you just have to trust that what you like, other people will like. And if you stay true to that and you don't lie to yourself, I'm going to like that because my client likes it, or I'm going to like that because somebody's telling me that's what I should like. That's the black hole, man. That's the abyss you stare into. You don't want to get on. You don't want to start thinking. That's the spiral you go down. The minute you start down that path, and that can yield a lot of creative results. Don't get me wrong, if you catch that in time. But you have to stay focused on you're serving the story. As long as you do that, you can't go wrong.
That's awesome, man. I so much appreciate all the time that you've given us tonight, but also the time that we've spent together. This won't be the last time we chat. We are fast friends, but forever friends. And man, I have so many things I've been a Disney kid my entire life, and so many things. And I grew up in Florida, and I was there all the time. And I did not know
that. I did not know that. That's new info.
We were there. Well, yeah, it's because while we were there, I was listening to you tell all of these stories I didn't know anything about, and so I appreciate your heart in that. I appreciate the knowledge you bring, not just to Disney but to the industry. And you're a hard worker and such a nice guy, and so I so much appreciate that, because sometimes that gets lost in this industry. We've been fortunate enough to hang out with some really, really cool and talented people, but you definitely make that list. But tell everybody where they can find you, where they can support what you're doing, stuff that's coming up. Throw it out there.
Okay. Jeff at microcosmicmedia.com. You can find me at JC Richard Art. And I'm going to be in the Mondo show next week, which is one of the best shows of the year. It's incredible. All my friends and family at Mondo really work hard on this show. Everybody does a lot of work for very little money on this show. So every collector out there should be, this, if you're going to pay attention to one show all year, you should be paying attention to the House Party show, which happens every March. Everybody that works for Mondo and the Mondo family, even people that do soundtracks, whatever, they do sketches and one-off OGs, $200, everything on the wall, which some of these people, if you saw what Brandon Holt did already, and Aaron's going to have some work in there. And
I think Mike Mitchell's this year is like a massive, like, I think he's trying to beat Jason Edmiston as the biggest piece on Mondo's wall.
Well, that's the beauty of this show, man, is we all know each other we're all good friends and we all compete. I mean, this is stuff that's the best part about having a little community like that and having shows like this is I'm sure everybody's looking at everybody else like, oh, I'm going to, you're going to sell that for 200. No, I'm going to sell this for 200. And that's, I mean,
you're trying to beat each other on value.
Well, you're trying to give a lot for the money, man. I mean, this is, I want to buy some pieces. Let's put it that way. So if you're going to pay attention to one show, this is the show that I would pay attention to. I have some, Indiana Jones APs coming up, which I'm doing another one for Bottleneck. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with Bottleneck, but they put out some great Lucasfilm stuff. And I'm going to continue that series so that you can look for that. And then I have something related to a particular Universal park, which I believe you visited for the first time last month. You went to... I
did go to Diagon Alley.
Yeah, so I might have something in that universe coming up. So I can't say anything about it, but I'll just leave it there.
Yeah. That doesn't tell us anything.
Nothing. I'm doing a Simpsons print. You've nailed me. That's what I'm doing.
Oh man! So go pick up some of his stuff if you get an opportunity. It's great, and you're so prolific. If you miss something this month, there will be something next month. So keep your eyes peeled on Cyclops. If you are part of that, if you're part of JC's Castle print series, there may or may not be something coming up in the.
Oh, I forgot to mention that there is another one. Yes.
So that's. And I don't know if you're going to take my idea or not, but I did give JC an idea that I think is just an incredible one. And if it comes up and he does it, you better believe I'm going to tell the world that I was a part of that ideation. So, but thanks for your time. Before we hop out of here, though, will you help us draw tokens so that we know what we're talking about next week?
Of course.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's it for the interview portion. Up next, we're going to draw some tokens. Every week we draw tokens to figure out exactly what it is we're going to be talking about the next week. We then pick our topics based on those categories. Here are the tokens. They're in my hands. I'm going to put them face down in front of me. I'm shuffling them up. But give me a number between 1 and 3, and you'll be picking for Patrick.
Oh, a lot of pressure. Sorry, Patrick, if I screw this up. Number 2.
TV and film, he will be just fine.
You did it.
Congratulations. All right, give me a number give me 1 or 2, and you'll be picking for Luke.
Let's go for number 1.
You got art and design.
Nice.
That means I have toys and games, and the world is a happy place. If you are watching this on YouTube, all the links and all the stuff that we talked about in this episode will be right below you. But if you're listening to this on any audio device, go to mofonepodcast.com where you can find show notes and links to all this stuff. You can find an archive full of tons of other incredibly talented, cool people who have given us their time. And you can hear some great, great stuff in the archive. There's so many episodes in the archive at this point. I mean, we've been doing this for almost 4 years. There is plenty of stuff in there. So something
4 years.
I know it's gross. And while you're at that, so you can support the show on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/MF1podcast to throw a couple dollars into the old proverbial bucket. It'll help us continue to do stuff like this. We will be at Crop in a couple of weeks, hosting and doing some great fun live podcasting. The week after that, we will be at Creative South, where we have a workshop as well as live podcasting happening there. So much stuff. Go to mofonepodcast.com for more information. Find us on our social media for updates on this stuff. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We're on what else? Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio.
Everywhere. You'll find us.
Anywhere where there's a thing, that's where we are. So just search M of1 Podcast and connect with us. You can join us on the Slack channel and have a conversation with tons of creative people every single day. Go to mofonepodcast.com/Slack. But I think for now, we're going to get out of this episode. I'm Andrew.
I'm Luke.
And I'm JC.
Peace out.
Hold on to your butts.
And always let your conscience be your guide.